singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arise.
Hi everybody and welcome. My name is Josh Powers. I'm your host. Welcome back. We are all in the studio here with ASRC, the Autism Spectrum Resource Center. And if you've seen the show before, all of our production crew is on the autism spectrum, and they always strive every week to give everyone a fantastic show, which they always do. So a few episodes ago, I had the pleasure of speaking to Laura Jean Vaughn, who is a mom with 3 young adult sons on the autism spectrum. And she shared her joys and trials of going through the process of having children on the autism spectrum. Today, we look at Caleb, a young boy who has autism. He was diagnosed 3 years ago, and his parents are here to share the story with us. So please welcome Mike and Lauren Anina. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here with us. I know it's not always the easiest thing to talk about your kids, but we appreciate it, and I really look forward to raising awareness, I think, is our main goal here, because so many people, including myself, aren't aware of really what it means to have a child with autism. So thank you for being here. So Caleb is 6 years old now. We were talking about this before. 6 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He was diagnosed 3 years ago. So for 3 years, you have at least known that you had a child with autism. So tell us about the whole, process of when it first started. I mean, was he technically 2 when you picked up signs, or how did that how'd that go about?
He was about 18 months old and hadn't really started to talk. And that was really, for me, the only big sign, I think. I think some other people sort of gave us the idea that maybe we should get it checked out. So we did call Birth 3, and they came out and did an evaluation. And they did start to give him service mostly for speech. And they really weren't sure that he was actually on the spectrum either. So we did end up seeing a developmental pediatrician.
Okay. And at what stage was that? Was he 2 then? Or?
He was about 2.5, and she actually did diagnose him on the spectrum, but we still weren't sure. We didn't really think it was a real thorough evaluation.
It happened very quickly.
Yeah.
She only spent a short period of time with Caleb when we were both there. And, the questions she was asking him, or the tasks that she was asking him to do, seemed very age appropriate, for someone. And very quick, and it caught us off guard that day. She was like, well, if you guys have time, I can give you a diagnosis. And she left the room, and we were kind of looking at each other like,
so you didn't expect that to happen?
No.
You didn't go there wanting
a three-step evaluation. Like the first day, she had really already made up her mind.
Wow.
So we were a little put off by that, I think. And because so many other people in our lives were like, well, I don't think he is. So.
Yeah.
Even Birth to 3. So we did get a second opinion at Yale, and it was after he was 3, and it was just a much more comprehensive evaluation. So we felt more comfortable at that point. He still wasn't talking, so we were much more comfortable with it at that point.
So it was 6 months, you're saying, from the first evaluation to the second?
About that.
About that.
And so what was going through your minds in that time, though? I mean, was it kind of a put-off at first, so you're like, it was almost denial for those 6 to 8 months, or was it, okay, soon we need to evaluate again kind of thing? I mean, what was going through your mind?
It wasn't that it was denial. It was just that it seemed very quick and very knee-jerk almost such a huge
serious
diagnosis after a very short period of time. And our name luckily came up at Yale, which was a 6-week process.
Wow.
Which again, we were both lucky enough to be able to attend, all of his sessions, and it was a very, very different experience than the first place. The communication between the people that were working with him and with us.
The criteria and how.
So it's a process to figure it out, though, is what you're saying. I mean, it's not just like when it's a physical thing and you get blood work and that day that night. This is a long process. It sounds like too.
Right, and you see some kids who it's really clear cut, and he's very high functioning. Even now, people say, "Really?"
So you wouldn't know it if he was if he was on the show with us. You really wouldn't know it.
It depends. I mean, I think there are times of the day where you wouldn't know it, but I think if you spend a large portion of time with him, yes, you would pick up on that. But right away, no, I don't think you would.
a lot of the red flags, that people look for when their child might be in question, the eye contact or the social kind of thing. Caleb did all those things. He, responded to his name. He was very affectionate towards the people in his life that he was comfortable with.
Okay.
Ourselves and grandparents and aunts and uncles and his brother, things like that.
Yeah.
So when you look back and you think of what might be a red flag, there were some things. That's why Caleb was kind of, for a lot of people that worked with him, he was kind of in this weird gray area where it wasn't very evident that he was on the spectrum, but it still wasn't clear that he wasn't either. So it was a long
process.
What
was his age when you kind of decided, it was kind of a definitive answer that, okay, Caleb is autistic? I mean, when did that day come?
Probably he was a little over 3. Right after his third
over 3.
I think once we had our final sit down at Yale was like, and we left there, and even I said, after everything that they just did with us for the last month and a half, I'm okay with this. You know what I mean? I wasn't okay the first time because it was boom.
Right.
Once we left Yale, and he was only 3. Being a teacher, I've seen kids that have some characteristics, 3rd graders, 4th graders, 5th graders, and it's like, we were right on top of it, and we were able to start to give him the things that he needs to be okay down the road, and it's a long road.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned family in there and stuff. Once that decision was made, it was a definitive answer. You now could say you had an autistic son, and you told family and friends. I mean, how did they take it? Do people know, at least around you, do people know what autism is, or was it in a time of explaining to and sharing what it really is all about, or how was that?
I think probably some people were more on board quicker. And, a lot of people in our family have taken it upon themselves to find out a lot more about it. I don't think anybody had a lot of information other than things you might see, like, in a movie. And so I think at first we're trying to compare it, like, well, people with autism do this and that, and Caleb doesn't do that. So, it's been 3 years now, so everybody's pretty much on board with it and, have learned much more about it. But, some people, I think, probably thought he was on the spectrum before.
Yeah,
we did, but
we should never say that. I'm
right.
sure. Now we'll talk a little bit more in depth about this in a few minutes. But who do you think had a harder time with it? Because I can see in multiple instances, not just with autism, but sometimes a grandmother, for instance, will have more difficulty with a tough situation in a family than the actual parents. Do you think, who do you think struggled the most in that? Who was emotionally affected the most?
Probably grandparents.
No. There have been times, Lauren's mom and dad live in Meriden, and they see, Caleb and Aiden, his brother, a lot more often. Almost, on a couple times a week, they help us get him on the bus and, different things like that. And because both of our families it wasn't like all of a sudden we made this big announcement. That your nephew or your grandson has autism. Everyone was up to date at every step of the way. Even our first evaluation, I shared that with my family, and we shared it with Lauren's, mom and dad, and but even our appointments at Yale, so it wasn't like we unveiled this all of a sudden, this big thing that everyone's going to. It over the course of all this time, like.
Everyone knew something was going on.
They knew something was going on, but, it's like one of those things that's like everyone has gotten to know, obviously, Caleb. It's their grandson or their nephew. Right. Well, it's like, Caleb's Caleb. I mean, everyone has their things.
Right.
Some kids don't eat fish sticks, and some kids don't. You get to know your nephews,
and it wasn't he didn't change the day he was labeled autistic.
Right. It wasn't like exactly. Absolutely.
Okay. So, did you guys know anything about autism before that initial, point of going to that first evaluation? Did you guys know anything about autism? Do you have friends or family? I mean, what was your knowledge of it at that time?